On the hit, I just mentioned how a big reason for Darnold's success this season is the fact that he's been excellent at avoiding sacks. And, he has run into some turnover issues, including the 3 last week. Obviously, there was a story with each one of those. And, on that, the one in the end zone, the pocket's collapsing and tries to get the ball out and it hits a helmet. So some tough luck involved there. But, for the most part, he has done a really good job of avoiding sacks. And I think that is obviously the offensive line for the most part, that play notwithstanding, is holding up really well in pass protection. I think the scheme is really helping out the offensive line when it's not this I always feel like I'm piling on Ryan Grubb. I don't mean to, but in this case, they were in shotgun and they were dropping back.
Right. Yeah.
So
you don't help the
last
O-line.
year.
You don't help the O-line at all.
Yeah, and this is an under center, run-heavy play-action offense. And so I do feel like that's a big factor is the offensive linemen. Life is just easier on them with the scheme and the play calling, but Darnold is doing his part by getting the ball out.
Well, let's get to part of that offensive line and something you just put out the Seahawks injury report from today. And yesterday, Zabel popped up there with a heel. He was limited, and he's again limited today. How worried should we be about his availability? And have we kind of undersold how essential he has been as a rookie to this offensive line and this team?
I think I can't remember who it was recently who said, one of the when you're talking about an offensive lineman, like one of the best testaments to how well they're playing is you just don't really talk about it.
Right.
And there's plenty of, film junkies who are out there and posting clips of him, winning consistently. But by and large, you don't see him committing penalties. You don't see him whiffing on blocks and ending up on his rear end. And, if you do watch it, you will see a guy winning pretty consistently. So, yeah, in terms of how concerning it is, it's tough to say. We didn't really – that popped up after we talked to Mike McDonald, so never really had a chance to ask McDonald about it. I would say based on the fact that he played in the game and he still has been practicing this week, doesn't sound as concerning as it could be.
What have you heard when people talk about Anthony Bradford? I've gotten used to okay, there's going to be 2 or 3 times a game where he falls on his face or he's pointing the wrong way. He's facing, the backfield and then you see him just dominate people.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's definitely more good than bad, but he's part of that unit that, like you said, has kept Sam clean.
Yeah, I think I heard a good analogy that I will steal here, which is that he is kind of like a slugger in baseball. Like a guy who
Mike Zunino.
Yeah, I'm sure Mike Zunino, somebody who's gonna hit for a very low average, but he's gonna get you 20 home runs.
Yeah.
But he's just gonna get a lot of strikeouts.
Yep.
And you just said it right there. He just very hit or miss. He'll have some bad plays where he just whiffs, and then every now and again, not every now and again, but a good amount of time, a good enough amount of time, because he's still starting for them.
Yeah.
He will just blow a guy off the line of scrimmage, and you saw that I think on one of the touchdown runs. And you can, when you look at him, he's just massive, and you can tell that there's a lot of power there, and I'm sure that they're just trying to find ways to harness that and to remove some of those bad swings out of the equation.
Yeah. Brady, all the buzz has been around the Rams and the 13 personnel, the 3 tight ends, and they've used this so much over the past few weeks. The offense has gone on an explosion since then. What challenge will that be, and how can the Seahawks, as a very good defense, probably try their best to counter that?
Yeah, I think they're I went and looked at their kind of offensive personnel percentages, and you're still talking about one of the higher, let's talk football terms here. Okay, 11 personnel, right? So that's 3, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. That is still by far their most preferred personnel package. So I think this is a game where you're probably going to see the Seahawks in nickel for most of the game, and maybe even in dime. Now that I think Tariq Woolen is playing as well as he is, he's probably forcing his to stay on the field to some degree. The 3 tight end stuff, I don't think I didn't look at the exact percentage week by week, but I don't think it's something they're doing nearly as often as what you have come to know that Sean McVay offense to really live in, which is having 3 receivers on the field. But how do you do it? You know that you got some big personnel out there. and you're going to have to, even if you don't match that, with bigger bodies yourself, you're going to have guys that have to play big. And I think that's why Nicky Manwari has been such a versatile weapon for them, is because he's playing consistently regardless of what kind of personnel the offense is throwing out there. I mean, he's shown that he can, line up and he can sort of cover like a good cover guy, but he's also a big physical presence that, you're not going to typically, when you bring in a nickelback, a lot of teams like to run at your nickelback because he's a smaller cornerback who's probably not super physical against the run, but Manwari has shown that he can be both of those things.
Have you noticed over the last few years, Brady, that the kids are getting more mature? And, this is something Schneider brought up to us, that, the guys now coming out of college with the NIL money and then the transfer portal and all that, they're a little bit wiser to the world, it seems like. And that's, you brought up Nick. I mean, Gray Zabel and him both. I mean, and Horton, you could say. There's lots of rookies that we're going to do a report card later, and I think I'm going to be giving out all A's. But for the most part, they just seem more mature, and that's kind of maybe one of the advantages of all the changes that have happened at the college football level.
Yeah, it could be. And, I mean, it's also, I think the NIL situation is probably compelling some players to stay in college longer. So now you've got guys who are
That's a good point.
a year older when they come out, because,
Right.
If you are, let's say if you are, you have a year or two left of eligibility and you could possibly declare for the draft. Well, if you're going to be like I don't know exactly where the cutoff is, but I would imagine it's probably like, 4th or 5th round pick. That might actually be a pay cut for you to come to the NFL.
That's right.
Based on the kind of contract you would get as a day 3 pick versus whatever NIL money you're already getting. So I think you're seeing guys who would be those, day 3 picks, maybe stay in college a year later than they would have, 5-6 years ago. And now you're just a year older, wiser. Physically, your body is more mature than you were. But yeah, I think, just having exposure to money, that could probably go one of two ways. You have all this money all of a sudden, and like, what do you do with it? So I think that could go one of two ways. But I think, to your point, the NIL stuff, I think it might actually, in some cases, just make guys a little more prepared for NFL life.
Brady, we heard you guys talk to Cooper Kupp yesterday, and certainly Mike McDonald and Sean McVay know each other well. That's kind of been billed as the geniuses matchup. I know they're going to downplay it, and Cooper Kupp, it sounded like he was downplaying the return. But how much do you think this game means to these Seahawks this week?
Well, I'm guessing that they realize that this is for first place, and this is not like for, your own individual storyline or whatever. And, Cooper Kupp, everybody is going to want to call this the revenge game, because that's just what, people do, whether it's, sarcastic or not. But I'm sure the game means a lot to him in the sense that he played there, and he still is close with a lot of people there. Is there going to be a little extra motivation for him? Maybe, but I don't think he's the type of guy who's going to go out of his way or is obsessed about, proving a point or anything like that. I know that it was interesting that when he first signed here in March, he talked about how difficult, he was open about how difficult that situation was on him and his family. Remember, there was that 5-week period where he was in limbo because, they told him they were going to try to trade him, didn't find a trade partner, and it wasn't for over a month from that point to when they ultimately released him. And when I talked to him earlier in the week, he just talked about how that felt like he was getting kicked out of his home and he didn't know where he was going to go. He also said when he got here that he didn't initially have a lot of clarity on why the Rams moved on. And remember, it seems like they did not make any sort of attempt to approach him with a pay cut or say, hey, let's figure out a way to make this work. They were just done. And he did sound like he didn't have a lot of clarity, but he told me that, he has since talked to Sean McVay, and sounds like they have mended some fences and he's gotten clarity and some closure.
Yeah. How much have you talked to Cooper? Have you quite a bit? Because I always see him, he's always talking football.
Yeah.
And he'll talk to coaches, and I understand McDonald's office is he's open door policy, and he's always in there. and it just seems like he is like an NFL lifer.
Yeah,
as far as-
yeah. I mean, he just seems like a consummate professional, and we've heard players talk about how his car is the first one in there, and he even told us this, and he didn't volunteer this. I asked him, but he said, on Wednesday he comes in at 5 a.m.
Good night.
And his whole plan there is, he wants to be up to speed with the quarterbacks because those guys get together on Tuesday, and he wants to be up to speed with the quarterbacks, and so that they're on the same page when he sits in on their Wednesday morning film session. So there's probably not too many wide receivers who are sitting in on their quarterbacks' film sessions, much less arriving at 5 a.m. to do that. So, and he just sounds like a guy who has an unmatched work ethic. And, coaches, McDonald has talked about, and I think Klint Kubiak too, about the kind of resource he is for them too, as a guy who's, they're coaches, they get paid to coach, but there's certain insights that only players can bring. And it sounds like he is, not shy about sharing those insights. And so you got to keep that in mind when you look at, the production. I mean, he's having probably the kind of production the Seahawks thought, but he is the kind of guy whose value goes beyond the bottom line production.
Is that, and then kind of leading into how everything blends together, for you maybe a big reason why this team is 7-2? It's Mike McDonald's second season. They've gotten off to this big start. It just sounds like from everything you guys have talked about and hearing that story on Cooper Kupp, everything seems to work together. It's collaborative, that everyone knows their role, from the coaching staff to how it helps the offensive line to how that blends together on offense and defense. Does that cohesiveness jump out as why this team might be 7-2 and among the best in the NFL?
Well, just talking about on the offensive side of things. I mean, this is a legit system. And again, I'm going to sound like I'm piling on Ryan Grubb.
He's fine. He's in Alabama.
I'm not.
They're doing
Ryan
right.
Grubb, if you're hearing this from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, this is not personal at all. But Ryan Grubb's, I mean, that was, it was a college-style offense, right? And he brought, I think, a lot of the principles that he was doing at UW, and they tweaked it and sort of built it up based on the personnel. But it was not a proven system, and this very much is a proven system. And you see it around the NFL, that West Coast system. And it's, Kubiak, he brought a number of his assistants with him. And so it's the best way I could describe it is it's a very established system that has proven to work. And you have coaches who have coached with Kubiak before. They all speak the same language. And it's hard for me to totally understand it, let alone, describe it on the radio. But I just think you are really seeing the difference between an unproven scheme and one that is very proven, tried and true, and you're seeing it really firing on maybe not all cylinders because the run game has not got going, but you did see it maybe take a step in that game against Arizona.
Somebody said something about Klint Kubiak being a head coach candidate, and I know his dad pretty well, and but he seems like kind of a quiet guy. So, but I haven't really talked to Klint that much. Super nice guy, really a smart football guy. But do you think he's maybe wanting to be a head coach at some point?
Well, yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting litmus test for, what exactly are owners and GMs looking for? Because just to say nothing about Kubiak's personality, if you just look at the bottom line background, young guy who runs a West Coast offense, who is coordinating one of the league's most explosive offenses right now. That is typically the kind of profile for head coaches that teams line up to try to interview, right? And that could be the case. But to your point, he is a very mild-mannered, low-key guy, and it does make you wonder, like, is how is that going to come off in interviews? Is an owner and a GM gonna, what are they going to think about his, ability to, galvanize 53, 70 guys, whatever it is. Now, the counterpoint to that is Gary Kubiak, his father, also, as you know, is also not the most boisterous, he's not the liveliest guy, and that obviously worked out well for him. He won a Super Bowl as a player and a coach.
That's right.
When you look at the Seahawks and maybe some deficiencies, we've talked a little bit about the giveaways and the turnover margin as that being kind of the thing that might keep them a little bit from reaching this top line of the Eagles and the Rams right now, something that certainly you might not be able to get away with against a good team. Are there a couple things you see from this team that, hey, you have to clean this up to beat a team like the Rams that they haven't done yet necessarily in a game?
Yeah, for as good as this offense has been, they have put the ball on the ground quite a few times, and you saw it in that game again. Oluwatimi comes in and they have the botched QB center exchange, which you probably understand that happening when you bring in a new center and the guy comes in cold off the bench. Yeah. But Rashid Shaheed put the ball on the ground on the kickoff, and Brady Russell was Johnny on the spot to recover it. And so it is interesting to think that as well as Darnold has played and as prolific as this offense has been, they have survived some turnovers so far. And that's something that as you play better teams and as the ball maybe doesn't quite bounce your way every single time, that's something that definitely has the potential to come back and bite you in the rear end. But, the one like the Darnold interception in the end zone, there is obviously some tough luck there when the ball goes off a teammate's helmet, bounces right to a defender.
Yeah, I mean, that they're second worst as far as giveaways. Only the Dolphins have more giveaways than they do. And I haven't heard Mike complain about that at the podium or anything. But if I look back on it, I don't see anybody doing anything that's, the one I remember the throw in Pittsburgh was that was pretty bad. He just clearly didn't see the defender. But it's not been it's egregious or anything. And it just I thought we would hear Mike address that because that is they're -4 and the Rams are +11. So, but yeah, have you heard him talk about that? And if there's anything they can do differently, because I don't see anything that's chronic, as far as the giveaways.
Yeah, it's funny. It is surprising, I guess, how many, when you look at the number, how many they have, because it doesn't feel like it's, it's not running backs consistently putting the ball on the ground or whatever. And McDonald has talked about it. He has said that, they put the ball, I think, in his wording, in jeopardy too many times. But, those are the things that naturally you're just going to harp on more when you're losing. And, when you're winning there, it's, by the way, it's more of a footnote type thing.
Brady, I know you've been busy with the TV hits all day, so I don't know if you've.
Well, I only did one, just to be clear. I only did one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, now
they had enough of me after one.
Really, only one.
In our mind, it was 5.
Yeah, such a build up to this, such a momentous occasion. So I don't know if you've had a chance to really look into this, but the story that came out today that the NFL has filed a grievance against the NFLPA for the report cards, those team surveys that have seemed to be very good for exposing some flaws that teams have then rectified. I know some bad organizations might not like it, but how do you feel about this from the NFL saying, no, we're going to keep our Players Association from letting our players weigh in?
It just reeks of rich, powerful people not wanting to be criticized in public. Yeah. And, I think there's been a lot of good to come out of those, and it turns out when you kind of call someone out publicly and, it kind of forces their hand to some degree. And, who knows how many and what owners specifically have really pushed for that. I don't know. It's tough to say, not really being in those conversations at all, but I do know that, you see teams that, whose players were vocal about things not being up to standard. A lot of those teams have made changes. I think one of the few issues that Seahawks players had raised about the Seahawks facility was, I think, not enough, trainers or something about the amount of, availability of trainers or something. And they built a new training room and they have, more space there. I think they have more hot and cold tubs and everything. So, that's an example of,
it seems good.
It's good.
It seems like a good thing.
Right.
Yeah,
well, but not every owner. I guess maybe this is the crux of it: is that not every owner has the funds and/or the willingness to make those improvements and to spend the money that it takes to do that. So maybe that's part of it.
Did seem like a strange thing, but appreciate the insight there, Brady. Thank you for making time. That was a great job on SportsCenter, by the way.
Well,
so I think you posted it, right? People can go watch that hit. Did you post it on social media?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, go check it out.
I made it through.
Go watch
Thanks, Brady.
Brady Henderson.